In the first map of Left 4 Dead 2, called Dead Center, the 4 survivors start the game at the very top of the Vanna Hotel in Savannah, Georgia, arriving there just as the last evac helicopter is taking off from the roof. We soon realize through dialogue that these 4 people have never met each other before, only ever calling each other by name after their formal introduction into the elevator. Many people found this to be a little strange, but then it's generally explained away fairly well, just by the fact that, it's a local evacuation center, and even being there a while, it's not likely you'd share and remember the names of every single person you come across, especially when, you're worrying about the literal apocalypse outside, Although Nick does call Coach in the opening cinematic, he is wearing a school PE teacher's uniform, so that's not really a, clairvoyant observation, in my opinion. This game is full of these little questions that are answered through the logical assumptions and atmospheric storytelling the player encounters. Another example is as they move back into the hotel, the survivors will have various voice lines like these.
Y'all know what the hell these things are?
Holy shit, zombies are real.
These don't look like people.
Zombies. Holy shit. They're real.
So the next question you have as a player is, why do the survivors act like they've never seen a zombie before? Isn't this a zombie game? The question's not actually asked incredibly often as far as I can tell, and when I have seen it asked, it's usually dismissed as inconsistencies with the opening of the game, them trying to make an exciting and fast-paced level, or just having player characters' reaction mirror what you would expect from a player reacting. Most people are too preoccupied with fighting the zombies in front of them to care about this, though. And while all of that is true, I'm not really happy with the answer. And I decided to try my best to piece together a real reason in-world why the survivors would act this way, considering the circumstances they're under. The circumstance of being in the middle of the zombie apocalypse. This explanation is going to include just assuming that you know at least the basic lore of the Left 4 Dead universe, such as what the green flu is, how it behaved and evolved, how zombies act generally as they are around the universe nearby and not nearby survivors, and it's going to need a little bit of clarification I'm about to give, which is what do I mean by seeing a zombie? For the sake of this little theory I'm doing, seeing a zombie is not going to refer to knowing zombies exist, but more so never having seen one up close, or even more specifically, never having to have personally dealt with or fought a zombie before. Assuming all of the survivors were driven to the evacuation center, or in Nick's case, he could have been in this hotel or a nearby hotel, I would not count seeing a zombie on the news or driving nearby an infected on the way over to encountering a zombie. Those are different things. So now that we've clarified what it means to encounter a zombie, how come they didn't see zombies before the hotel? I mean, sure, it doesn't count that they saw one on the way over, but have they really not fought or had to deal with a single one of them? All 4 survivors? That seems a little, weird considering the whole city's overrun by the time the game starts. Well, I can explain it, or at least I can try. Nick is not a Savannah native. He was only passing through the city acting as a con man when the outbreak hit. Most hotels for big cities tend to be concentrated within a few miles of each other, so Nick could very well just be staying in the Vanna Hotel or a very nearby hotel. As soon as the evac station was set up, he probably headed there. He doesn't want to stick around. He doesn't want to be stranded in Georgia. We also know that all airports were closed down in Savannah on September 25th, according to the newspaper clipping in the conference room. With this knowledge, we can just assume that Nick was here, he couldn't leave, and so he tried to get to the closest evac as soon as possible. Likely before any zombies were really overrunning the city. Coach is a local school teacher. The coach. He is within the major city, and he'd likely be within the very first group of people bussed off to an evacuation site. Schools are usually used as centers for people to gather for evacuations during times of emergency. And if he lived near the school, and he's not stupid, which we know he's not, he probably went there pretty quickly himself as well. Now you might think that's a little bit of a cop-out, just saying, well, they showed up before the infection got bad, or honestly, they might have showed up before special infected even made their way into the South and evolved there. It's supported pretty well by Rochelle existing as a character. Remember, Rochelle's a newswoman. She's from Ohio, not Savannah. The reason she's in Savannah at the Vanna Hotel was to document the creation and operations of the evac station by CETA. Rochelle probably got here way before September 25th when the airplanes closed down, which means she got here significantly before even the first infected was spotted in the state, let alone Savannah itself. She states throughout Dialog during the first level, the first part of the first level, that she had seen zombies on the news but never in person, and it's kind of really blowing her mind. This makes perfect sense. She likely never ever left the evac center. If the apocalypse was going on outside and my job was in here, I wouldn't leave either. I really don't blame her.
Holy shit, zombies. I saw the news reports. Hell, I produced some, but wow.
Ellis is going to be the person that is the most difficult to convince you of here. Mostly because Ellis has a tendency to say wild shit that makes absolutely no sense pretty often in the game, like this line, which he says inside the hotel literally 2 minutes after he exclaims that he's never seen a zombie before.
Instead of evacuating, I armored up a truck to drive myself out of here. Built that thing to be zombie-proof. Well, it turns out it was only 99% zombie-proof. Last 1% tore that truck to shit.
This one I'm gonna have to chalk up to Ellis hearing about zombies when the infection was first found in Pennsylvania, tricking out a truck like it's Dawn of the Dead, and then the truck being what he drove to the evacuation site, before, being promptly removed from the truck by CETA and stuck into the hotel lobby to wait for evac like everybody else. As we know, the pattern in these games is once a zombie enters the safe zone, it's entirely overrun in the matter of a single day, if not a few hours, or, in the case of the Sacrifice comic, a couple minutes. I find it highly unlikely that Ellis would have been able to manage to encounter this many zombies, to total an entire truck, tricked out no less, and then still manage to get to the hotel in time to meet up with the survivors as CETA is getting their own evacuation. So, we've discussed Ellis is probably full of shit. That's fine. He's probably full of shit a lot of the time, especially when talking about Keith. Rochelle, Coach, and Nick got there under seemingly reasonable circumstances before things got too bad. Okay, cool. There's another problem though. I don't know if you noticed this while playing the game, but after you exit the roof and enter the 8th floor of the hotel, there's kind of zombies like everywhere. First, let's get out of the way that little inconsistency with the opening cinematic, where you see them climbing 30 flights of stairs, according to Coach. In reality, there's only 8 floors, which is like 16 flights of stairs if you count each section between platforms separately. But Coach is out of shape, he's got an injured knee. Let's let him have that exaggeration. We know that things in the opening cinematic were eventually changed, like the roller coaster segments in Dark Carnival, so we're gonna kind of ignore it in terms of why this hotel is set up the way it's set up. Why is there a floor on the top before you go to the rest of the hotel? Probably because it makes it easier for people to only encounter like 30 zombies before they have to go down and encounter the rest of the building. The important part is the zombies are there. They're in the building. They are right there when you open the door. And this is where I have to kind of insert piecing together a timeline that is very important for this theory to work. All 4 of the group ended up in the evac station at least a full day or more before the game starts. They have no weapons, likely because there is a check from the military to make sure people aren't bringing weapons into a safe zone. Pretty normal. At some point, something happens that triggers a wave of special infected, or even a horde of regular infected, to enter the safe zone. I have a theory on what this something is, but we'll get to that later. This causes a panic, and fire starts in the 1st floor in the dining hall where the kitchen is. In response to the fire, or the infected, likely both, the survivors take the stairs isolated at the corner of the building from the rest of the hotel all the way up to the 8th floor. They cross the main hallway, they enter no rooms, then they take the roof access. We know from the fact that the zombies don't attack you till after you exit the roof that they can't sense you through these stairwell doors. And if no other survivors tried to take the stairs, none would be opened to try and get up. On your way back down, they are blocked by debris, but this is likely because either special infected did break through the doors, or other survivors, before they were promptly murdered or turned into zombies themselves, eventually tried to take the stairwell but just weren't quick enough compared to our survivors to get through. So if this is how it happened, they still had to go through that 8th floor. How come they didn't see any of those dozens of zombies we mentioned? Well, in my opinion, the only option is that there weren't any zombies. How did they get there? Well, I think they were already there, but they were people instead of zombie. In maybe the 1 or 2 short minutes the survivors are on the roof gathering weapons and lamenting missing that chopper, all of those people turned into zombies. Okay, brother, how did that happen? How did that many people in this hotel, how did this whole entire hotel become either infected, murdered, or infested with zombies in literally less than 2 minutes? That doesn't make any sense. Didn't you just say the stairwell is isolated from the rest of the hotel? That 8th floor door isn't open on the other side. How come they got there so fast? Explain yourself. Well, you didn't think I showed up here without any supporting evidence, did you? Here's where we get into the lore of it. So it's important to note that the time it takes for a person to actually turn into a zombie is hotly debated, even within universe for Left 4 Dead. There are a few reasons why I believe a quick change like this is possible. I have 2. One is a little less reliable, one is very reliable and direct supporting evidence. The first, and least reliable, is the graffiti on the walls in Left 4 Dead 2. There is a section of the game in a safe room where you can see the time it takes for someone to turn into a zombie being repeatedly crossed out and replaced with lower time limits, ending in only 2 minutes. I'm saying this is the least reliable because I doubt anybody was holding a stopwatch in the middle of the apocalypse, and also time of infection is really hard to account for depending on how you became infected. This virus is sometimes airborne, sometimes skin to skin, sometimes fluid transfer, so it's pretty much impossible to know 100% for sure how and when a person got infected, and if it was really 2 minutes exactly. My other reference, though, is very good, in my opinion. It's the helicopter pilot in No Mercy. After he says he's gonna pick you up, there's a line where he says he had an incident on ground pickup well on the way to the hospital.
Mercy Hospital. Gonna be running a bit late. I just had an incident. News chopper 5 out.
And another one once he finally picks you up.
Just tried a street pickup. I should know better. I think I got hit.
These 2 lines are pretty good evidence that he is, becoming a zombie, or at least going to become a zombie. He got hit by a zombie. That happened. The ETA he gives you is not related to the real time it takes to beat the finale, but the numbers in game that he gives is about 10 minutes. That means that assuming after maybe 1 or 2 minutes flying towards you, he gets hit and tells you he's gonna be late. So let's give him 8 minutes between the hit, or a bite or scratch or whatever it was, and getting to you. The game doesn't tell you exactly when he becomes a zombie, but there is a voice line at the end that shows him turning literally while you're in the helicopter.
Not feeling so well.
This would make sense because when Zoe shoots him in Crash Course, you see they're still inside the city of Fairfield. So it could not have been very, very far after they get on to begin with. But if we're gonna go by the voice line that you could hear, the absolute earliest we have real proof of someone turning into zombie is under 10 minutes. This leads me to believe that as long as some kind of infection is spreading through the hotel within 10 minutes of the survivors reaching the roof, they absolutely could encounter the same people who are simply becoming sick on the way up, but are suddenly zombies on the way back down. A minor supporting detail of this is one of Nick's voice lines when he first encounters a zombie.
Jesus, they're attacking now!
Notice he says they're attacking now, implying that he saw these same people before, but just not as zombies. Now granted, this could also just be Nick having driven past a zombie, seeing it being idle, and being surprised that they are now attacking him. Or possibly a reference to how the green flu started as just a severe illness before suddenly developing rabies-like symptoms causing violence and aggression. He doesn't elaborate though, so it's going into my supporting evidence. So now that we have all the context and the deduction and everything that I kind of needed lined up to make a timeline out of the way, here's what I think happened that allowed the survivors to never encounter a single infected up close until they were on the way back down from the roof after the evac failed. So the start of my timeline is kind of at the start of the timeline for the game. The green flu becomes apparent. People are being quarantined because it's spreading quickly and they're getting very, very sick. They're telling people to wear masks and wash your hands, and it's just not a fun time for anybody, right? Then suddenly, over the course of a few days, all sick people become extremely aggressive and excessively violent towards healthy people. This is triggering the immediate quarantine and evacuation of the entire Northeast, and preparations for evac and safe zones start being established in the Southeast in preparation for the very likely spread of the virus. Within 2 weeks, mutations and transfer from skin to skin to airborne infection occurs. Special infected are now about. All the airports are shut down very shortly after Rochelle arrives to document the South, and all other survivors eventually are brought or travel themselves to the safe zones as the infection starts to pick up and enters Savannah. Within the first week of Savannah being infected, the 2 major evac stations are overcome, including the one our survivors are in. CETA, who had their testing center and personnel located on the 8th floor with all of their research equipment, are separate from the civilians, and they are experimenting with boomer bile, which we find in the conference room along the main floor hallways. People are being evacuated from the safe center at a slow pace because CETA now knows they need to test for carriers before they're removed. Some carriers sent to holding zones in New Orleans, where we know later they are promptly killed. Others, who are not carriers, are sent to real safe zones to be evacuated to what we eventually learn are cruise ships. At some point within this 1-week period, placing it 3 weeks after the start of the violence in the infection, there's a breach in the dining hall of this hotel safe zone. This is either due to special infected breaking down the doors or general horde, but what I find most likely is they're drawn there by the boomer bile on the top floor with CETA. There is likely some kind of dropped vial incident happening. They're in fragile glass. We break them all the time in game. Anybody on the top floor not already in their hazmat suits are immediately exposed to the virus. All civilians who are waiting for evac, as well as multiple CETA employees who just weren't taped up properly at the time. This causes the horde to begin to enter the building at high speeds, scaling walls, breaking in windows, smashing through doors. One of these infected, again, likely a special like a charger, knocks over something in the ground floor and starts a massive fire in the dining hall. Any of the CETA personnel not in direct contact with the bile immediately evacuate themselves, leaving any survivors not already in the evacuation zone behind. They are likely infected, and it is likely too late for them. Infected scaling the building are in the rooms, but have not yet broken down the doors to enter into the hallway. As the survivors climb the staircase, it's cut off from the rest of the hotel. They don't encounter any infected. Very lucky, considering everyone at this evac is probably unarmed. Once they make it to the roof, below them, anybody who's a carrier and not immediately infected and turning into a zombie is being murdered by the special infected and other infected, scaling the building, breaking into windows, and if anyone unlucky tries to come up the staircase after them, inviting them into the stairwell. This will explain why there's debris there again. Maybe a charger, maybe just a big zombie, maybe a person trying to block the stairs below them while they scale, only to succumb to the virus themselves the next floor. While the survivors are hanging out on the roof after passing this top floor, only 2 or 3 minutes depending how long you want to stay up there, the persons below could have been exposed to the infection from anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes at this point. We don't know. This is just a theory about when they got infected. On the way back down, it is fully taken over, and there's now zombies everywhere on the floor, taking our survivors who just passed these humans on the way up completely by surprise. They're scared, they're confused, and that is why the Left 4 Dead 2 survivors act like they've never seen a zombie before.
Holy shit, zombies are real. I knew it.